From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
Good morning. I'd like to welcome you to the 15th Annual National Book Festival. My name is Christina Barron, and I'm the Kids Post editor at the Washington Post, one of the charter sponsors of this event. Thank you. Jarrett Krosoczka has become a quick change artist of children's literature. He has written 12 picture books, starting with Goodnight Monkey Boy when he was just 23 years old. From that story about a mischievous boy who doesn't want to sleep, he moved on to Friendly Slugs, Bath Time Pirates, and punk rocking farm animals. It's Tough to Lose Your Balloon, which will be released next week, is a story about looking up when you're feeling down. His chapter books, the Platypus Police Squad series, follow two web-footed detectives who aim to keep Kalamazoo City safe from illegal fish sellers and crooked politicians. His fourth in the series will be on shelves next year. And his 10 Lunch Lady graphic novels have exposed the secret life of school cafeteria workers who are whisk-wielding superheroes when they aren't dishing out chicken nuggets. As of next week, he will have 30 books bearing his name, all in the past 15 years. So do the math on that one. But I want to emphasize not just the amazing catalog of stories, but the artistry behind it. The black and white drawings in the Platypus Police Squad complement the detective stories. The Lunch Lady illustrations are as energetic as the wavy-haired heroine. The bold colors of his punk farm books make the animal rockers and their after-hours concerts jump off the page. Jarrett has been drawing and writing stories since he was in elementary school up in Worcester, Massachusetts. As his school cut its art program, his grandparents supported his creative talents through classes at the Worcester Art Museum. He had a comic strip in high school in the newspaper, and he went on to study at the Rhode Island School of Design. 6 months after graduation, he had a contract to write and illustrate Monkey Boy. Jarrett has an inspiring TED Talk about how he became an author and illustrator that has been viewed more than 750,000 times. But we are lucky enough to have him here today. Please join me in welcoming Jarrett Krosoczka.
Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. Thank you all for being here, but I'm a bit concerned that there are so many people in here that perhaps you thought the sign said Sheska, and I know the consonants just blur together, so if this is a disappointment to you, I won't be offended if you have to leave. I understand. Thank you. It's such an honor to be here. My name is Jarrett. Feel free to call me Jarrett because Krosoczka can be a difficult word to get your mouth around there. And I am going to talk to you today not only about my books, but how I got to be an author and an artist. And for me, it started right at the very beginning. This is a self-portrait from preschool. And I drew this picture with crayons. Now, raise your hand if you've ever drawn with a crayon before in your entire life. Well, see, that is how I got to be an artist. It's where it began for me, by drawing with crayons when I was in preschool. And I'm very proud to say all these years later, I have the same haircut. The first time that I ever wrote a book was when I was in the 3rd grade. And I remember being 8 years old and being in class and the teacher presenting this project where we were to be writing and illustrating our own book. And I loved every step of this process. I remember brainstorming, learning about the concept of brainstorming, where you're getting all of your ideas out of your head and onto the paper, and then organizing those ideas and laying out the book. And my book had a cover. It had a title page. You know, at 8 years old, I was clearly concerned about my intellectual property by throwing up that copyright notice, so don't pirate this book. Copyright 1986, right there. And it was a story that was told with words and pictures. And that is exactly what I do for my job today. I tell stories using words and pictures. And sometimes the words will work alone to tell the story. Sometimes the pictures will work alone to tell the story. The very last page of my book was the About the Author page. And it read, Jarrett lives in Worcester, Massachusetts. He goes to Gates Lane School. He liked making this book. And I love that last sentence. He liked making this book. I love to think of the 8-year-old version of me writing that sentence after he completed this book. And it's exactly how I feel today. And I loved writing that book so much that I wouldn't wait for this to be a school assignment. I'd come home from school, I would take out pieces of paper, I would fold them in half, and I would staple them together, and I would make my own books. You know, I was raised by my grandparents, and my grandmother made sure there was a drawer for me in the dining room, in the hutch, that I can open up at any moment, and there was paper and markers and pens and pencils and crayons so that I could just access these materials independently. So I would write these books. I had this book series from 4th grade. There was an egg, a tomato, a head of lettuce, and a pumpkin, and they went to a haunted house. And in this haunted house, there were all sorts of dangers around every corner. There was an evil blender that wanted to chop them up. There was an evil toaster that wanted to cook them. There was an evil microwave that wanted to melt them. I'd also make my own comics. So after school, on the weekends, whenever I had some free time, I would use that free time to be creative and invent stories and make something out of nothing but my imagination and a pencil. When I got to high school, I got to be the cartoonist for the high school newspaper. And so to have these stories published and printed, you know, and my peers, like the other kids in my high school who I didn't know, were reading them and enjoying them. And I thought, that's what I want to do for sure. I want to have my books published. I want to share my stories with people. I want to make a career out of being creative. So, but even in my last year of high school, I said, I want to write and illustrate picture books. So I went to college to study art. I studied at Rhode Island School of Design, and I couldn't just get into taking these illustration courses. I had to take classes where I was learning about color and learning about design, and drawing classes where we were learning about light and shadow and architecture and perspective, painting classes where we had to paint still lifes, we had to paint the models that would come in and pose. But just like when I was a kid, whenever I had some free time, I would use that free time to be creative and to write and to illustrate. But those required courses in painting and those drawing courses began to seep into my cartoon work, and I started painting my characters. And every single semester, I took a different writing course, because while I was pursuing a degree in illustration, I knew I wanted to be the author of these books that I would draw the pictures for. And out of all of the writing classes I took, my most favorite class was a class where we were learning how to write and illustrate picture books. It met every Wednesday from 8:30 in the morning until 3 in the afternoon, and it was my favorite days of my college education. And the big project for the semester was we had to write our own picture book. And this is from that book. It was called Hello, Said the Slug. The class was over at the end of the semester, and I thought, oh, I have this book. And I could just throw it in the back of a drawer, or I could send it out to a publisher and see what happens. So midway through my junior year, I mailed this book out to a publisher, and I waited, and I waited, and I waited, and I waited, because that's how publishing works. But eventually I heard back from that publisher. And guess what happened? Did they like my book and publish it? Yeah, no, they didn't. They didn't like it at all. You know, they mailed the book back with a rejection letter. That's a letter where they tell you that they don't like your book, and thanks for sending it, but we're not interested. But did I give up because I had one rejection? No, I mailed the book out to a second publisher. I waited, and then that second publisher, they wrote me back. And did they like the book? No, they didn't. They rejected the book too. But I was determined, and I mailed the book out to a third publisher, and did they like the book? No. Yes, I'm glad I'm helping manage your expectations in life. But no, and the fourth, and the fifth, and the sixth, and the seventh, and the eighth, and the ninth, and the 10th publisher, they all had the same reaction, which was, no, we're sorry, we don't like this, it's not for us. But I did not give up. I mailed that book out to an 11th publisher, and guess what happened? Did they like the book and publish it? They did not like the book either. They were not interested, asking me to leave them alone. But I kept writing, and I wrote a book called Josh Had a Bad Haircut. And I thought, well, it's a different book, different story. I'll try this book. I mailed this book out to a publisher, and did they like this book? No. Did any of the publishers like this book? No. But in one moment of the story, the boy wears a paper bag on his head, which would later inspire me to write a different book called Baghead that would later get published. But now all of the books that I had written, they were all getting rejected. So I started thinking, like, well, it's just my writing. They don't like my stories, but maybe they'd like my art. And if they liked my art, perhaps I could get hired to illustrate a book that was written by another author. And so what I would do is I would paint a picture every week, and I would design a postcard. And on that postcard would be my art, my name, my website. I sent 80 postcards out to 80 different people at all of these different publishers. And how many of those 80 people got in touch with me? 0. Right. So I painted another picture. I mailed out another 80 postcards. And how many people got in touch with me? None. And the next week, how many people got in touch with me? None. Yeah, no kids. 0. Don't worry. Just nobody, rejected. Yeah, those are all the right answers right now. And but so I was approaching the 2-year anniversary of my first book rejection. So what did we get on that occasion? You write, you keep writing, and that's what I did. I kept writing. And I wrote a book called Goodnight Monkey Boy, painted this character study, painted this illustration, and so I was befriending a lot of authors that lived in the Boston area where I was at the time. And one of those authors was my friend Grace Lynn. Her very first book, The Ugly Vegetables, had just been published. And we met for coffee, and I said, Grace, what can I do? Like, I keep sending these postcards to the art directors, and I don't hear anything. And she said, you should send your postcards to the editors. So that next Monday, I did. And then that Thursday, I went to check my email. And this is how checking your email was in 1999. You went to your computer, and you turned it on. You pressed the button to turn it on. And then 20 minutes later, the computer was ready to be used. And then you had to look for this little blue triangle, and you clicked on it, and this thing called America Online would open. And then you connected to the internet through the phone line. And ask your parents what a phone line is. They'll be happy to explain what that means after this. And this little computer voice said, you've got mail, and it was from someone at Random House. And they said, hey, I like your work. I received your postcard. If you're ever in New York City, let me know. I'd love to meet you and see some more. So do you suppose that I happened to be in New York that next week? That next week, I was in New York, and I met with this editor, and I left New York with a contract for my first published book, Goodnight Monkey Boy, on the 2-year anniversary of my first book rejection. Thank you. Thank you. And so I kept writing. I kept writing picture books, Baghead, Punk Farm, Ollie the Purple Elephant. I wrote a series of graphic novels about a lunch lady who fights crime. And there are 10 books total in that series. And I'm also currently working on Platypus Police Squad, which is a middle grade novel series about 2 platypuses who are cops. There's the grizzled old vet, Detective Corey O'Malley, who's partnered with the hotshot young rookie, Detective Rick Zango. So if you love Frog and Toad, if you love Frog and Toad, Our Friends, the books, and parents, if you loved Lethal Weapon when you were younger, those movies, this, but age appropriate for children, it's a buddy cop movie in a book for children. And like all of my other books, it's very heavily illustrated. You know, there are a lot of illustrations. Unlike my other books, unlike my picture books and graphic novels, it is the text that takes the lead in the storytelling. And so over the years, people would ask me, Jarrett, what is the difference between writing and illustrating picture books and writing and illustrating graphic novels? And I say it's like comparing red apples to green apples, right? They were very similar, some different flavors involved, different colors, obviously. But both a picture book and a graphic novel requires the words and pictures to work together equally. So then I wrote my first novel, and that was like a pineapple. That was like this whole other thing for me to figure out how to do. And this is where Platypus Police Squad came from. It was 1 year before Punk Farm was to be published. And I drew a picture of a character from Punk Farm. I asked the students at the school visit to guess what they thought my next book would be about. And they all had these different ideas, and they were all incorrect. And one of the incorrect ideas was that this was a book about cops, animal cops. And I couldn't shake that. So I started writing a book called Penguin Police Squad, about these 2 penguins, the grizzled old vet, the hotshot young rookie who plays fast and loose with the rules. And I filled my sketchbooks with these penguins, thinking about their penguin home lives and how they'd be different, thinking about the other penguins in this penguin city. I studied the penguins at the New England Aquarium. And after a year of filling up my sketchbooks with penguins, suddenly penguins were everywhere. This was the mid-2000s, and suddenly there's a penguin documentary that was really popular. Suddenly there were multiple animated movies starring penguins. There was this online video game about penguins. And my manager, who helps me show, hey, what book are we going to show to the publisher next? He said, what are you working on? And I have this great idea. It's called Penguin Police Squad. And there was silence. And he said, can't do it, man. Penguins are done in this town. Nobody wants another penguin story. And I was crushed because I'd spent a year working on this penguin story. So that happens in your creative life. Sometimes you have to take a deep breath, take a step back, and ask yourself, well, how can I change this? How can I shift gears? And I thought, well, what do I like about Penguin Police Squad? For one, I love the alliteration. Alliteration is where two words start with the same sound, so penguin police. I love that penguins are weird and strange. I love that they're unlikely heroes. So I thought, what other animal starts with a "p" sound, is strange and weird, and would make for an unlikely hero? I said the platypus. So it became Platypus Police Squad. And what I thought was the worst thing to happen to the book became the best thing to happen to the book, because now I'm dealing with platypuses, which are stranger and weirder. And now that I'm dealing with platypuses, I thought not everybody, and everybody in the story does not have to be the same species. So suddenly there's a flamingo who's singing at the nightclub, and there's a panda who owns the nightclub, and half of the businesses in town, and no one's quite sure what his true motives are. You know, there's the kangaroo, who's a young up-and-coming boxer. You know, there's the hippo, who's the bouncer. There is a giraffe district attorney, but unfortunately her part got cut in the story. And giraffes are really hard to fit into the illustrations because their necks are so big, so it worked out for the better. So I put together a pitch, you know, a document where you're showing publishers, hey, here's my idea, what do you think? And Walden Pond Press at HarperCollins, they totally got what I was doing with this. It's a buddy cop story, it's an action-adventure story. It's a big brother, little brother story. It's a story about friendship, and it's a story about heroes versus villains. And so these were the original concepts for the characters, and you can see they were wearing uniforms because the first draft they were officers, not detectives. And I had to answer some questions. Do I want us to tell the story in the past tense, present tense, first person, or third person? And I do research with all of my books. So when I was working on Punk Farm, I went to rock concerts, I went to petting zoos. When I was working on the Lunch Lady series, at every cafeteria every cafeteria at each school that I would visit, I would stop by and introduce myself to the lunch staff. And once they learned I was writing a story about a superhero lunch lady, they allowed me to photograph their equipment. VIP access. It was like Willy Wonka's factory. And with Platypus Police Squad, I watched documentaries about platypuses. I did a ride-along with the Northampton Police Department, so I got to sit in the front seat of a police car and just ask questions about that officer's unique individual experiences. And when I had to go and rewrite the story so the officers became detectives, the conversations I had with the officer when he said he used to be a detective, he said, look, young detectives, they care about what they look like, you know, fancy haircuts, designer leather jackets. The old guy, like, they've just let themselves go. You know, they're wearing the same suit they wore 20 years ago. It doesn't really fit them anymore. And so that information helped me design the characters. And now when I'm writing any book, I organize my ideas using a story mountain. So I sort out what's going to happen in the beginning and the rising action and the climax, the falling action and resolution of the story. And I got to writing. And I wrote more words than any book that I'd written before. I was so proud of this first draft. I had never written anything so long. And I sent it off to my editor, Jordan Brown. Yeah, it's here for Jordan Brown. Big Jordan Brown fan. And he's a very smart editor. And here were his thoughts on that first draft. Here are the first 2 pages of his letter explaining why that first draft just wasn't working. Please note, this is single space. Here are pages 3, 4, and 5. And here are pages 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13 of his letter, a 13-page letter explaining why that was just rubbish. And not so much, he would use kinder words, but it was rubbish. I was trying to tell the story as if I was writing a graphic novel. So I had to slow down with my language. I had to really get into the minds of the characters and explain how they felt through their actions. To show and not to tell, like every teacher ever told me ever. And I got to writing and revising, and now that I have the story written, I go through and I highlight moments, and I draw little sketches in the margins of the manuscript, and I think about how do I want to tell the story now with the pictures? How can I use those pictures to highlight moments of the story? How can I use these illustrations to call attention to certain moments of the story? So I give my publisher a bunch of sketches. Those sketches get plugged into the design, and now I have to make the finished art for this. So I take brushes, and I dip them into ink, and I create the finished line work, and it looks something like this. I pencil out just the shapes, and I create a gesture sketch of these characters. And after I sketch everything out, I'll take that brush, I'll dip it into the ink, and I'll draw the finished line work. And I draw with a brush because you get a very dynamic line when you draw with a brush. If you apply a lot of pressure, that line will be very thick. If you apply the slightest bit of pressure, that line will be very thin. Now, I drew with a pencil that's called non-photo blue. And this is a pencil that cartoonists use. What it is a special shade of blue that the computer cannot see when I scan the artwork in at black and white. So when I scan the in at black and white, you only see the final line work. You don't see the sketches. All of the gray tones get put in. And I have to work on the cover. I give the publisher a bunch of sketches and ideas for the cover. That gets developed. I give them color sketches because people will judge a book based on its cover. Sometimes the cover is all you have to hope that someone will pick up your book and read it. From the time that I started thinking about Platypus Police Squad, then Penguin Police Squad, to the day that the first book was printed and published, 9 years had passed. But I kept at it, and I'm very proud of the response it's gotten from young readers, to the kids who've made YouTube videos reenacting their favorite scenes, the kids who are making Halloween pumpkins, the people who have dressed up as the characters for Halloween. I got to design the summer reading art for libraries all across the country for the Every Hero Has a Story campaign. So there's The Frog Who Croaked, there's The Ostrich Conspiracy. The third book that's out now is called Last Panda Standing. And in May of next year, Never Say Narwhal will complete the story of the Platypus Police Squad. There's my studio. And let me switch to this microphone. And I'm going to come over here and I'm going to draw a picture of the character. Can you guys see? Because there's a speaker right there. And let's see, can this move back? I will end up breaking things. Yeah, let's not do that. So like I said, I always start off by just drawing a shape or two. And kids, if you can't see over here, there's plenty of space right here. So if I just draw a shape like that, and a shape like that, that will become the basis for the two main characters in the book. And I'll figure out where their arms and legs will go. I'll add the details on top. So I'm sketching everything out, and I'm hoping I make some mistakes here, because you learn from the mistakes and you'll say, no, I don't want to put that there. I'm going to put that over here. So I sketch it out. We're pretending this orange marker is that blue pencil. But then I'll take my ink and I'll create that finished line work. And again, it's only that black line work that you see in the finished book. So we have Detective Rick Zango and Detective Corey O'Malley of the Platypus Police Squad. And do we have another minute? We have 5 minutes. Oh, then I get to draw some more. Okay, I'm gonna draw another character of mine. There's this other character of mine where, how I talked about, I just start off by drawing a shape or two. Well, this character, I start by drawing 2 teardrops. I will draw an upside down teardrop like so, and then a regular ended teardrop like that. Now that becomes that character's head and torso. And you figure out where figure out where the legs are going to go, where the arms are going to go. Now, on top of that, I'll start to have the details of the characters here. Glasses. And now I'll take out that ink and I will create the finished line work. We have lunch lady. Thank you. So I talked about quite a few things just now, but what I hope you remember the most is that my career as an author, it didn't start when I was a grown-up who then wore sports coats to things, It started when I was a kid, just like you guys. It started when I would come home from school and I had free time. So I would take out paper, I would take out pencils, and I would just make things. Because there's so much joy to be had by taking ideas out of your head and putting them onto paper. You get to create your own reality. So whatever is going on in the world around you, all that matters in the moment is what you're creating on the page. Thank you guys so much. I'm so flattered that you all came here to see me. Thank you so much. I'll be signing books 12:30? I'm sure it's on the schedules. I'm sure I will figure out where I'm signing books. And so I have a new book coming out on Tuesday. It's called It's Tough to Lose Your Balloon. It's a picture book. And I'll say it's not a storybook. It is a self-help book for kids about feeling better about the crummy things in life. So, and Never Say Narwhal, May 17th, 2016. Thank you guys so much.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.